everyone, my name's Jo and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator in the UK. This is my first project actually for the Stampin' Society group. I've recently been asked if I would join them, which I was delighted to do so, and I've just stepped into the shoes of our very own Martin Stone, so I'm hoping I'm going to live up to his standards. So fingers crossed you're going to like what I've got for you today. I'm going to be using a stamp set called Fond of Autumn even, and this really appealed to me, this stamp set, when I saw it in the catalogue, because my favourite season, or one of my favourite seasons I should say, is autumn, and also the colours of autumn is what I particularly like, so I really love to create with them. So I'm going to show you the project we're going to meet today. So this is quite a simple little card, but I think it sort of packs a punch really. It's really pretty, and it just, I don't know, it just reminds me of autumn so well that I loved making it, and I'm going to show you how it was created. So first of all, what I'm going to do is give you some measurements. So I'm in the UK, so I'm obviously creating this in UK sizes, but I have got some imperial measurements for you as well. So if you work in imperial, you can also make it along with me. So first of all, we have our card base. Now in the UK, these measure 21 across by 14.85, and then they are scored at 10.5 to give our card base. And I've used thick Very Vanilla. Very Vanilla I don't use a great deal, not because I don't like it, because I do. It's a lovely soft creamy colour, but it works particularly well with autumnal colours, I think. So that's why we're using Very Vanilla today. And if you're working in imperial, you would like to make yours at 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches tall, and then score at 4.25, and that will give you your slightly wider and shorter card. Okay, we're then in two further layers. So in metric measurements, this one would measure 13.35 centimeters by 9 across, and in imperial that is 4.75 high by 3.5 across. And then also you need one layer that's slightly smaller than that. So in the UK it would be 12.85 by 8.5 across, and then in the imperial that would be 4.5 by 3.25. So it's slightly different shape for the actual imperial measurements, but it will fit your cards perfectly. So that's why it will be just a slight difference, but the products are all the same, so you'll be fine. So as you can see on the smallest top layer, I have actually used one of our new embossing folders. It's called Leaf Fall, and this is one of the 3D embossing folders. So you get that really deep imprint into your card, and I've actually stuck with using the Very Vanilla thick throughout the whole project, because I think it just adds that little bit of stability to what we're trying to achieve, and it just makes these indentations, I think, stand out just that little bit better. So that is what I've used for embossing that part. So that's quite straightforward, and we can pop that to one side. You're also going to need one of the circles. Now you can use whatever you wish, but I have used for my circle the Stylish Shapes dies, and I'm moving around a bit, and it's the third circle out, so it measures approximately 4.3 centimeters across, or 1 11/16 across, but it doesn't really matter if you've got one that's just slightly bigger or smaller. It's to pop our greeting on, so it doesn't really matter massively, but that's just to give you an idea. And you also need a piece of scrap card as well. So I'm going to pop everything to one side apart from our piece of scrap, and I'm actually just going to bring in a piece of scrap paper as well, because what I want to do is I want to add some colour to my actual piece of card. Now you can use sponges, you can use sponge daubers, you can use blending brushes, our foam rollers, whatever you have that you prefer to use for your sort of colouring in the backgrounds. So I've used a combination of colours, and I've used Mango Melody, Early Espresso, Cajun Craze, Cherry Cobbler and Old Olive. But as again, these are just autumnal colours. So if you don't have these particular colours, or you like something with a little bit more orange, perhaps you could use pumpkin pie. So just gather together a selection of sort of autumnal colours that you could use for the project. And I tend to start with the lighter colour. So I'm starting with Mango Melody. And I probably will come back and add a bit more of this towards the end, you'll see. But I'm going to start with it anyway. And what I want to do is just to add some colour to my card. Now, I'm not worried too much about it being a smooth covering. I'm not worried too much if it gets little marks in it. I can add some texture to it. It really, really doesn't matter. So just add some colour to your card. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in all the gaps eventually. So, you know, go dark, light, exactly as you want it. It really doesn't matter. And then I'm going to work through my colours. It doesn't particularly matter what colours you use in what order, because these are all reasonably dark. I only tend to start with the lighter one because it is that much lighter, albeit not a lot. So this is Old Olive. So again, I'm just adding some little areas. Again, texture really doesn't matter. We don't want this to be perfect because we're trying to create the colours of autumn, so we're just adding the colours as we go. And I'm overlapping them as well, so just completely free. And I'm going to add some cherry cobbler. Now obviously this is a really dark colour, so this is going to show up quite a bit, so just bear that in mind. And again, add some texture. It really is just about sort of getting colour onto your card. And it's actually nice that it's quite sort of relaxed, so you don't have to worry about sort of really trying to be sort of neat and tidy with it all. Sometimes it's nice just to be a little bit free with it. Okay, and then finally I'm adding a little bit of early espresso. This is probably the least colour that I would add because it's quite dark. So I just want to add some little patches of it just to indicate the sort of changing colours of the leaves and things like that. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm quite happy that I've got coverage all over my piece of card. So again, I just picked up a piece of scrap out of my actual box for this, so you can use whatever you have to hand. If you've got odd shapes and stuff, it doesn't matter. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to do is to try and add a little bit of gold leaf. So I don't know if you can see on those leaves, there is some little gold leaf just on here, just to add that little bit of a autumnal sort of, I love gold with autumnal colours, that just works really well. So I've got my gilding flakes here, and I pop mine into a big pot because, as you know, they tend to float around all over the place. Now, if you haven't got gilding flakes, you can use something like a background stamp that you could emboss with gold heat embossing powder. That would also add a nice effect. So you just want something that's not a defined background. You want something that's a little bit sort of what I call like a splodgy stamp, really. So you could use something like that, but I'm using the flakes because they're fun, but they also make a terrible mess, as we know, but we shall see. So I've added a little bit of multi-purpose glue just onto my scrap paper here, and I'm just using a dauber just to pick up a little bit of that glue, and I'm literally just going to tap it onto my paper, and you can't really see where I'm going with it other than the odd little white patch, but it's just that tacky glue that we want. Okay, and I'm going to pop it into my flakes and just rub it roughly over the background. This is where it gets all messy. So if you want to add some more, you can, or less. You can scrape it off if you want less, but just play with it until you're happy with the coverage on it. Okay, so I've got the worst of my flakes off of here now. Now, as you can see, they do float around a little bit. You can't really avoid it. It's just the nature of them. But I just use the edge of my brush here just to remove anything like sort of little loose pieces, just to take them away. And then I'll pop those loose pieces back into my pot for use for another day. Okay, so let's get rid of those. So they float around in the air, so let's put the lid on those quickly. Okay, so now that I've got my base actually done, and I've taken off all those little excess pieces of gold that I don't want on there, I can then think about my leaves. Now, if you look at these leaves here, in the stamp set, we do have the lovely leaves which I've used here, and they have all these beautiful veins within the leaves, which is the bit I wanted to retain. Now there is an option, you can use the autumn bouquet dies which coordinate beautifully with this set, and there is a little leaf . There is a little leaf here which I can't get off. There we go. There is a little leaf that fits this die perfectly, but as we know with the dies, it just leaves that little extra border around the edge. And what I wanted to achieve was to actually keep my veins and not have that border. So the only option for me was to actually fussy cut these leaves out. But if you don't feel happy with that, as I say, you can stamp them and cut them out. You'll just have that edge on it. Or if you are not worried about the veins, you can just use the die to cut the leaves as well. So there's options there, whichever you decide. Okay, so because I'm going over this gold in certain areas, I'm using black StazOn for this, because I want it to be, if I used a dye-based ink or early espresso ink, for example, what would happen, it wouldn't stick onto the gold sections. So we just want to make sure of that. So I'm going to use StazOn, and I will show you. I'll do one straight in the middle here just for ease, but you can see it will stamp over the top of the gold. It is a bit lighter, but it's just enough for you to know where to cut, and it keeps all those veins in there as well. So you're going to need 10 leaves in total. And what I'm doing is I'm just randomly stamping them, picking up the different colours as I go. Some will have little gold pieces on, some won't. It's just, that's the beauty of it. You're just creating your own leaves with your own design. Okay. So now that I've done that, I would need to fussy cut those out. But in true style, I have pre-done these just for ease, so that you're not watching me cut out 10 of these little leaves. They're actually not that hard to cut out, and don't worry too much if you lose the black outline, because it's the veins that we want to keep. So if you cut off the black outline a little bit, it doesn't matter. It's not going to show that, okay? Right, so if I bring in my card now, just make sure I've got some clean hands before we start. What I want to do is to actually stamp my greeting. Now, our greetings are beautiful, but sometimes you have a long greeting which you don't particularly want it to be a long greeting. You want it to appear as a top and bottom. Sometimes you have a top and bottom that you want long. So this is just an easy way to be able to create that if you want to. Now I'm just going to grab a wipe so that I've got one to hand, because I will need to clean this in between. So first of all, I'm going to start off with the autumn. So you can either use a post-it note or something to cover that word wishes up and then ink your autumn. Or what I like to do, because there's a gap between the two words here, I just make sure that that gap is between the gap of the two words on my ink pad. So all I'm inking is the autumn. Can you see that on there? So just make sure, I like to move it along to make sure I haven't got any light patches on my ink pad anywhere. And just make sure you've got a nice covering, and then you can stamp your autumn, which I've now done. Oops, I've got a bit of gold leaf still floating around there. But you do need to make sure that you now clean your stamp, but you also need to make sure that it's dry, because although it's clean, if it is still damp, when you go to use it again, you will get an outline of the word. So just bear that in mind. And I'm going to repeat again, but this time with the wishes stamp, or the wishes part of the stamp, I should say. Now, I might have just moved over slightly there, so just be careful. Just make sure you wipe it away, any excess that you may get somewhere else. And then I'm going to pop this onto my circle. So then I have my autumn wishes. So it's quite a simple way to create a card or a greeting where you can move it on to 2 lines rather than just the one if you wanted to. Okay, so next thing we need is a piece of ribbon. Now I have used the gold shimmer ribbon, so this is quite a nice sort of sheen to it. You're going to need probably about 20 centimeters, 8 inches, something like that. I haven't actually sort of measured it. I just need a small piece which I can fold into 3 sections, okay? So I just folded it into 3. And I want to position it on my card where I want my sentiment and everything to go. Now, you can stick this down with glue dots, you can use double-sided tape, whatever you prefer. I like to do a quick cheat and do a quick staple in the middle. It means there's no excess glue anywhere that I'm not bothered about, and it's just quick and simple. Now, this is the old retired Stampin' Up! Staple, but of course you can use any stapler, anything that you've got in your office or whatever. So now that I've popped that onto there, I'm going to glue these 2 sections together. So my staple is going to be hidden inside my layers, so there's no fear of anyone catching their hands or anything like that on it. Okay, and just move it around until you've got it nice and straight. And I'm going to stick that directly onto my card front. Getting to the end of my glue. You can mount this onto dimensionals if you wanted to, but I wanted to make it so that it would go through our normal postage system here. But of course, if you're handing it, then you could use any kind of layers that you wanted to. So now what I'm going to do is to glue my sentiment in place. So I did use dimensionals for this part, but this is the only part that I did use them on. And I'm going to be a little more generous than perhaps I might be normally with my dimensionals, because I want it to be quite balanced. So I've just got 4 on there. I might have just got away with 2 or 3 normally. So I want it to be quite balanced and quite stable. At this point, you can still move your ribbon around a little bit if it's not quite where you want it. I'm just going to glue or stick my greeting into place. Okay, so now it's just a case of simply adding your leaves where you would like them to go. So I try and get a sort of mix of leaves. So there's some green, some yellows, some reds, and I'm not actually being very particular about where I place them. I just want to get them, imagine falling leaves. They're not very particular where they fall, so just add some leaves and then we'll add some more in a second just to sort of build it up a little bit. And don't worry if they cross over, however you want them to fall, it really doesn't matter. And then I'm going to add some that are partly on the actual circle itself. Stuck to my finger a little bit. No, that's not going to stick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit dimensional underneath once I know where everything's sticking. So it will just hold everything in place nicely. Okay, so again, I will stick a little bit under there. You can see I've used scraps of cards for these ones because they've actually got something on the back of them. So don't throw away those scraps. You never know when they might be useful. Again, you can add as many or as few as you want. I'm not sure actually how many I cut out here, if I'm honest. So yeah, just use whatever you want to use. And put that one underneath again. I actually quite like that, just like that. I think I might leave that one. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've used 9 that time. So again, you can use whatever you've got. It doesn't have to be precise. So just add as many or as few as you wish. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a couple of little slithers of our dimensionals. And I'm just going to pop these underneath my leaves. I like to do it this way because you can just sort of pop them under and then you know that they're in the right place. And then I can remove any backs or anything and stick them down. Again, just tuck it underneath. So I'm happy that's where it's going to go. Just remove my backing. So it just gives it that little bit of support. That's all we're looking for, really. So there we go. That's our little card there. So the last thing I did was added some little gems, and I've actually used our champagne rhinestones. I think these look beautiful for autumnal projects because again they've got those beautiful sort of coppery goldy sort of tones that loan themselves to autumnal stuff. That's 2. I'm just going to add 3. There we go. So there we go. So that is how you make that card. Really nice and simple, really quite quick with regards to actually putting it together. Fussy cutting obviously takes a little bit of time, but as I say, you can use the dies if you prefer, if that's something you would like to do. If you're not bothered about the veins and stuff, then I would say just die cut them. It's just I think they added that little element of detail to it that I liked. But as I say, it's entirely up to you. And I hope you like that today. So I've really enjoyed making it. So I hope you will too. and I'll see you again next month for another Stampin' Society. Take care. Bye bye.